Pacific Theater, 1943. The war had been raging for nearly 4 years, and the skies over the Solomon Islands were no place for beginners. Every sunrise brought new dogfights, and every sunset meant fewer planes returning to base. The American forces had clawed their way onto Guadalcanal, but the Japanese still owned the air whenever the Zeros appeared. That's when Lieutenant Jack Reynolds arrived. 23 years old, straight from flight school in Florida. The sweat hit him before the fear did. The moment he stepped off the transport plane, the humid air smelled of burnt oil and gunpowder. Mechanics were dragging the remains of a wrecked Wildcat off the strip. It wasn't the welcome he expected. Reynolds was assigned to VMF-212, a Marine squadron holding the fragile airfield at Henderson. Their aircraft, F4F Wildcats, were tough but outdated. Against the fast and graceful Japanese Zeros, they might as well have been flying bricks. The veterans knew it. They'd seen pilots shot down before they even spotted the enemy. Jack didn't look like much to them. Tall, quiet, carrying a sketchbook filled with drawings of planes instead of pinup girls. "You'll last a week," one of the older flyers told him, slapping his shoulder. The others laughed. "Just keep your parachute dry, rookie." But Jack had something the others didn't. A strange calm. He'd grown up on a Kansas farm where wind and sky were his only friends. Flying came naturally like breathing. In training, his instructors called him reckless, said he pushed the plane beyond its limits, but he believed machines had souls. "If you listen close," he used to say, "they'll talk to you before they die." That line earned him his nickname, Crazy Jack. By his third day, he was already in the air. His first mission was supposed to be routine, a patrol over Iron Bottom Sound. But nothing in the Pacific stayed routine for long. At 11:20 a.m., the radio cracked with panic. "Zeros! Zeros incoming! 11 o'clock high!" The sky that had been peaceful moments ago suddenly came alive. Black dots swelling into silver arcs. The Japanese were diving in formation, sunlight flashing off their wings. It was Reynolds' first real fight. His heart slammed in his chest as he shoved the throttle forward. His Wildcat rattled violently as he climbed into the sun. Tracers ripped through the air around him. A voice screamed over the radio. Someone was hit. The old-timers had told him not to dogfight a Zero head-on, but Crazy Jack didn't pull away. He kept climbing, straight into the swarm. "Reynolds, break off! Break off!" his commander yelled. Jack didn't listen. He rolled his plane over the top and dove straight into the lead formation. The first burst of his guns tore through the belly of a Zero. A clean hit. Flames trailed from the Japanese fighter as it spiraled into the sea. The men at base couldn't believe it when his Wildcat returned. Pitted with bullet holes, canopy cracked, but flying. One kill on his first day. The same pilots who'd laughed at him now stared in silence. They still called him Crazy Jack, but now they said it was something close to respect. The Americans had finally gained a fragile foothold in the Solomon Islands, but the Japanese still ruled the sky after dark. The men at Henderson Field lived with the constant hum of engines overhead. Friend or foe, no one could tell until the tracers started flying. Every night, the washing machine Charlie raids, lone Japanese bombers dropping a few bombs to rob the Marines of sleep, reminded them the war was far from over. Lieutenant Jack Reynolds was no longer the new kid, but he still had that glint in his eyes that made the others nervous. After his first kill, word spread fast. Some said it was luck. Others whispered he had a death wish. Either way, his name began appearing in the squadron log. One more mission, one more Zero claimed. He flew with instinct, not procedure. While other pilots turned with the enemy, Reynolds dove under them, using the Wildcat's heavier frame to survive moves that should have torn the wings clean off. Captain Walter Hines, his commanding officer, hated it. "You fly like the rules don't apply, Jack," Hines told him one evening. "Sir," Reynolds replied quietly, "I don't think the Zeros read the rule book either." By November, his logbook showed 7 confirmed kills, but that came at a cost. Half his original flight team was gone. The attrition rate was brutal. Every new morning, an empty bunk reminded the men that no one was untouchable. The Japanese pilots were no amateurs. Many were veterans of China and Pearl Harbor, trained to perfection. Their aircraft, the Mitsubishi A6M0, could outclimb, outturn, and outfight almost anything the Americans put in the sky. Reynolds respected them, maybe more than he should have. "They're not devil," he once said to a mechanic. "They're just men who fly like they already know they're dead." Then came November 17, 1943, a date burned into every man who survived that day. A Japanese naval task force was spotted near Bougainville, and intelligence reported they were sending over a heavy fighter escort. VMF 212 was ordered to intercept. It was supposed to be a quick strike. Get in, disrupt, and get out. At dawn, the squadron's Wildcats roared off the strip, their engines coughing black smoke into the golden sky. Jack led a section of 4 planes, young pilots who looked to him now as a veteran. He still wore the same torn gloves from his first mission. They were his charm, he said. At 9:43 a.m., radar picked up movement, fast, closing in. A wall of enemy fighters appeared from the east, glinting in the sun. "My God," one pilot breathed, "there's at least 20 of them." 20 Japanese Zeros, flying tight formation, diving straight toward them. Captain Hines' voice cut through the radio. "Break formation. Scatter. Don't let them surround you." But Reynolds didn't scatter. His fuel was low, his options worse. The others broke away, but he turned straight into the storm. Tracer fire slashed the sky. Reynolds rolled hard, pulled up through the enemy formation, then dropped behind a Zero's tail. His first burst ripped its wing apart. Debris spun past his canopy, but 3 more Zeros were already behind him. His radio crackled with chaos. Men shouting, engines dying, fire in the distance. "Reynolds, you're surrounded! Get out of there!" He didn't answer. He was breathing too hard to talk. The sky above Bougainville was turning into a blender of smoke and sunlight. 1 against 20. No sane pilot would have stayed. But Crazy Jack wasn't most pilots. He checked his ammo, tightened his grip on the stick, and whispered to himself, "All right then, let's dance." Over Bougainville, November 17, 1943. The morning sun burned across the horizon as 20 Japanese Zeros swarmed over the sea. Their formation moved like a living thing, perfectly synchronized, lethal, beautiful in its precision. And in the middle of that storm, a single American Wildcat twisted through the sky, its engine screaming at the edge of destruction. Lieutenant Jack Reynolds knew the odds. 1 man, 1 plane, against 20 of Japan's best. The smart move was to dive and run. But the moment he saw his squadron scatter below, something inside him refused. He couldn't leave them behind. He shoved the throttle forward until it rattled, feeling the Wildcat shake as if it might fly apart. The first Zero came in from above. Reynolds pulled a tight barrel roll, let the Japanese pilot overshoot, and lined up his shot. 2 short bursts, tracers hit the fuel tank, and the Zero exploded in midair. A flash of orange and smoke filled the sky. 19 left. The next pair dove from opposite sides. Jack yanked the stick hard left, forcing them to overshoot, then dove straight into the ocean spray. His altimeter spun madly as he skimmed just 50 feet above the waves. The Zeros followed, but the heavier Wildcat could take dives they couldn't. One pilot pushed too far. His plane clipped the water and vanished in a trail of foam. "2 down," Jack muttered, half laughing, half gasping for breath. The G-forces were brutal. Blood pounded in his ears. He felt his vision closing in, but adrenaline kept him alive. He climbed sharply, rolling over the top, and found himself face to face with another Zero. They opened fire at the same instant. Bullets shredded his right wing. Oil sprayed across the canopy. Jack's engine sputtered, but he held the trigger. His rounds ripped through the enemy cockpit. Both planes broke apart, spinning in opposite directions. Somehow Jack regained control, his Wildcat coughing but still flying. He was running low on ammo, just a few bursts left. He had no radio contact, no backup. The sky around him was chaos. Burning planes, drifting parachutes, the sea below littered with wreckage. At that moment, something strange happened. The remaining Zeros began circling him, cautious. They'd never seen a pilot fight like this. To them, he was either insane or a master. Jack took a deep breath, leveled his wings, and climbed straight into the sun. For a few seconds, he disappeared completely. The Japanese pilots craned their necks, scanning the glare. Then from the blinding light, Reynolds dove, guns blazing. Two Zeros erupted in flames before the others even reacted. Another clipped his tail as it exploded, sending debris through his fuselage. He was bleeding now. Shrapnel had sliced through his shoulder. But he didn't stop. 15 minutes of pure chaos. 15 minutes of life and death. By the time the last Zero broke away, Jack's Wildcat was a wreck. One wing was half gone, his guns empty, and his instruments dead. But the sky was silent. The surviving Zeros turned back toward Bougainville, limping away into the clouds. Of the 20 that had attacked, only 4 made it home. Jack tried to speak into the radio, but his headset was fried. He didn't even know if anyone was alive to hear him. Smoke filled the cockpit, and the ocean below spun closer and closer. He whispered through clenched teeth, "Just a few more miles, old girl. Just a few more miles." Then the engine quit completely. The Wildcat glided toward the sea. Jack pulled the emergency lever, ready to bail out. But the thought hit him. If he jumped here, he'd drown before rescue arrived. So he stayed with the plane. The horizon blurred. The coast of Guadalcanal was barely visible in the distance. His hands trembled on the stick. He could see smoke rising from the base. His base. With no power, no ammo, and no luck left, Jack Reynolds aimed for home. And somehow, impossibly, the Wildcat kept flying. November 17th, 1943, south of Bougainville. The sky was a haze of smoke and silence. The once blue ocean below now shimmered with burning oil and debris. Lieutenant Jack Reynolds gripped the trembling control stick of his crippled Wildcat, trying to keep her level. The engine sputtered, coughed once more, then fell quiet. Now there was only the whistle of wind rushing past shattered metal. He was 20 miles from Guadalcanal, 20 miles of open ocean and no power. The altimeter needle wobbled, dropping fast. His shoulder throbbed where shrapnel had torn through the flight jacket, but he ignored the pain. He was too busy talking to the plane, like an old friend. "Come on, girl. Don't quit on me now. We're almost there." The Wildcat glided lower, the prop frozen still. Reynolds scanned the horizon, praying for the faintest glimpse of land. At 5,000 feet, he spotted it. A smudge of green rising from the endless blue. Henderson Field. Home. He trimmed the wings, trying to stretch every bit of lift he could. The cockpit stank of fuel and smoke. Instruments flickered, then died one by one. He was flying blind now. Back at base, the radio room had gone quiet hours earlier. The squadron was overdue and search patrols were already preparing to launch. Captain Walter Hines stood by the runway, chain-smoking, staring at the empty sky. "Reynolds won't make it," someone muttered. "You don't know that," Hines said sharply, but his voice betrayed doubt. At 3,000 feet, Reynolds hit rough air. The Wildcat bucked and dropped. His shoulder slammed against the canopy frame. He bit back a groan and pulled up, muscles screaming. The shoreline was closer now. He could see the palm trees, the tents, even the faint movement of people below. Then a new sound, the wail of a Japanese engine. Out of the clouds above, a single Zero appeared, maybe one of the few survivors from the earlier battle. It curved toward him, wings flashing in the sun. Jack cursed under his breath. He had no ammo, no power, nothing but gravity and guts. The Zero lined up behind him, guns twinkling. Tracers zipped past his cockpit. He rolled instinctively, diving toward the waves. The ocean sprayed across the canopy as bullets ripped through his fuselage. He needed a miracle, and somehow he found one. The Zero overshot, too fast, too low. Jack yanked the stick and leveled out inches above the water. The enemy pilot tried to climb, but his wing clipped the sea and shattered on impact. A plume of spray marked his grave. Jack barely noticed. He was fading, blood loss blurring his vision. The island was just ahead, less than a mile. Smoke trailed behind him like a signal flare. Men at the airfield started shouting, pointing toward the horizon. Someone grabbed a field radio. "It's him! It's Reynolds! He's coming in!" The landing strip rushed closer. Jack's plane was gliding too fast, too low. He couldn't risk a full landing. His gear was jammed. He aimed for the beach instead. The Wildcat skidded across the sand, nose down, ripping through waves until it flipped onto its belly. For a moment, everything went dark. Then voices, hands, the sound of running feet. Marines splashed into the surf, dragging him free from the wreck. His flight suit was soaked with blood, face blackened with smoke. Captain Hines knelt beside him. "You're one stubborn son of a gun, Reynolds." Jack managed a weak smile. "Told you she'd bring me home." He passed out before he could see the men cheering around him, or the 20 black plumes of smoke still rising far out at sea, each one marking a zero that would never return. That night, the camp stayed awake. Word spread fast. The kid they'd called crazy had gone up alone against 20 Japanese zeros, and somehow made it back. For the first time in months, Henderson Field felt like holy ground. Guadalcanal, November 18th, 1943. The dawn broke quietly over Henderson Field. For the first time in weeks, there were no sirens, no engines, no bombs, only the whisper of the ocean beyond the palms. Inside a makeshift field hospital, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds opened his eyes to the dim light filtering through canvas walls. His body ached from head to toe. His shoulder was stitched, his ribs taped, and his hands wrapped in white bandages. But he was alive. Captain Walter Hines stood by his cot, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold. "You sleep like you fought, Reynolds. Loud and impossible." Jack smiled faintly. "How bad is the plane?" "She's finished," Hines said, "but so are 20 zeros." News of the battle spread across the island like wildfire. Mechanics, infantrymen, even cooks came to see the man who'd taken on 20 Japanese fighters and come home breathing. They called him a hero. The brass called it impossible. The radio operators at Espiritu Santo transmitted the report to Pearl Harbor, where officers double-checked it 3 times before believing. Within days, every pilot in the Pacific had heard the story of Crazy Jack Reynolds. Some said it was luck. Others said it was divine intervention. But to the men who'd fought beside him, it was something deeper. A reminder that courage still meant something, even in a war that seemed to devour it daily. When Jack could walk again, he returned to the flight line. His Wildcat, or what was left of it, sat at the edge of the strip, a twisted relic. Someone had painted the impossible on its fuselage in white letters. He laughed when he saw it, then quietly saluted the battered plane. Command offered him leave, a chance to go home, see his family, rest, but he refused. "The boys out there still need someone to bring them back," he said. "If I can fly, I'll fly." And he did. Through 1944 and into 1945, Reynolds kept flying, now in the newer F4F Wildcat, leading young pilots who grew up hearing his name like a ghost story. His legend spread through every base in the Pacific. The farm boy from Kansas who took on 20 zeros and lived. He never bragged about it. When asked how he did it, he'd just shrug. "You don't think," he'd say, "you just fly." By war's end, Jack Reynolds was credited with 38 aerial victories, making him one of the top Marine aces of the Pacific. But he never called himself a hero. He once told a reporter, "Heroes are the ones who didn't come back." When peace finally came, he went home to Kansas, trading the roar of engines for the quiet hum of wind through wheat fields. Sometimes neighbors would find him sitting alone by his barn, staring at the horizon, as if still watching for zeros. In 1963, decades after the guns fell silent, a letter arrived at the Marine Archives in Quantico. It was from Japan. A retired pilot, Hiroshi Takeda, had written to say he was one of the few who survived that battle over Bougainville. "Your Lieutenant Reynolds," he wrote, "was not crazy. He was fearless. And every man who flew that day knew we had met a pilot of rare honor." Jack never saw the letter. He'd passed away a year earlier, quietly in his sleep. But his story lived on in flight manuals, documentaries, and whispered tales told in every ready room where young aviators prepared for war. They still called him Crazy Jack, not because he was reckless, but because he refused to die when everyone said he would. And somewhere, high above the Pacific, where clouds roll endlessly over silent waters, the legend of Crazy Jack Reynolds still flies.